In this video, we're going to go ahead and create our very first Android application. The first thing I want to show you is just what happens when an update comes through. You may recall in a previous video, we went through and configured Android Studio for updates. So this is what you'll see when there is an update. It'll pop up with a little message when you start Android Studio. You just need to literally just click on update, click on update now, and it will actually download and install whatever it needs to update, and you'll be good to go. So I'm just going to go through and let that finish now, and then we'll actually get started on our first Android application. And you can see we're now done. So click on finish, and we're good to go. Depending on the update, it may actually ask you to restart your Android Studio. So if you haven't already, start your Android Studio application. If you're on a Mac, you can go into the applications folder. If you're on a Windows machine, you can actually go into program files, and there'll be an actual link there, or I should say an icon which you can click to start Android Studio. And on Linux, you can actually use the technique I showed you in that video to access the desktop entry and start it. So once you've started Android Studio, what we're going to do is create, as I said, our first project, our first application. You do that by clicking on Start a New Android Studio Project. It's going to come up and ask you a few things. It's going to ask you the application name. And we're going to keep it simple and call our first application name Hello World. Now the next part here may be a bit confusing, company domain. Now with Android applications, they use the concept of a package name to make sure that your application reference, if you will, is actually unique across the world. And the reason that it needs to be unique is when you eventually go to upload your code to the Google Play Android App Store, in other words, your own Android applications, perhaps making them available for sale, you need to have a unique identifier that's not used by anyone else. So what Google usually suggests you do is come up with a company name. So in my case, I'm going to use my domain name. I've got a domain name called timbercharka.com. You notice as I'm typing timbercharka.com, the package name is being updated automatically. So you can see that Android Studio uses this reverse domain name to create the package. So I typed in timbercharka.com, and it came up and said com.timbercharka.helloworld. And the hello world was a representation of what I typed in the application name, minus spaces and all in lowercase. So if you haven't got your own domain name, that's okay. Just use something like org.example. That can be a good one to start off to use. You can literally have anything there, but just do note that once you're creating your own applications and you're at the stage of uploading them to the App Store, that you will need to have a domain name so that you can make this unique. So I'm going to go back and paste mine in now, timbercharka.com. Next, you need to define the location where you're going to start saving your projects. Now, this is just like a word processing document in the sense that you need to choose somewhere to save them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little button here, and I'm going to go and save mine on my desktop. So I'm going to choose the desktop. Then once I've chosen the desktop, I'm going to come up here and create a new folder. Click on New Folder, and I'm going to call it Android Programs. Android Programs. Click on OK. And you can see that's created a new folder now. Click on OK. And I've now got that path to Android Programs on my desktop, and notice automatically that Android Studio has appended the name of our application, Hello World, to that. So in other words, it's going to create a subfolder for this project. So as you create lots of projects, as you move through this course, there'll be one subfolder for each of those projects. So they're neatly separated, and you're not running any risk of actually getting into difficulties in some way in terms of overwriting code. So that's really what the concept of this first screen is. So click on Next. Next, it's going to ask you some questions here, and this might be a little bit intimidating. You might be thinking, well, what's all this about? Well, firstly, before we start talking about minimum SDK, these things here will normally be disabled. So what they are is, where is the Android functionality to run Android applications on things like watches and so forth, in other words, wearable devices. TV is for Android TV, so you can create applications that work with Android TV. That's TVs that actually are running the Android TV operating system. Android Auto is for cars, automobiles, literally. Again, it's a special version that runs on that, so you can create applications for that. And last but by no means least, Android Glass. That's the technology that enables you to actually run on glasses that you actually put on your face, over your eyes and so forth. We aren't going to be targeting any of those in this course because to actually do them justice, you would actually need to create a course in their own right for them. So you'll leave those all disabled for this course anyway. But the important thing on this screen is this minimum SDK. So what this is, SDK stands for Software Development Kit, and this is the version of Android software, of the Android operating system, the minimum version that your application is going to run on. So if we have a look here, if we select the drop down, we can literally go all the way back to the very first version of Android that ever come out, and we can target a full 100%. Now that's great if we want to fully support everything, but by adding support for all versions of the Android operating system going right back to version 1, we are limited in some of the functionality we can use, because as new versions of the Android operating system have come out, Google have updated it and improved it and added a lot of features. So consequently, it's not recommended to go back and say that you're going to support that minimum version. It's a bit of a trade-off between the percentage of people who can access an older version and the functionality that you want to have in your application. So as a general rule, what I do would be recommending that you start your minimum version. Your target is Android 4.1 Jelly Bean. And you can see that's 88.7% of the devices that are active in the Google Play Store. You could go back one if you wanted to and go back to Ice Cream Sandwich, but I'm pretty comfortable saying that you should choose API 16. So again, in a nutshell, what that's saying is that anyone who's running an Android version going back to Android API 16 or higher will be able to run the applications that you create. If they've got running an older version, they won't be able to download and run your application. So I suggest you use API 16 there, and we'll be using that through the course as our minimum SDK. So click on Next. Next, these are the various types of projects that you can create by default with Android Studio. And you can see we've got like a no activity, a blank one, that's the one we're going to be using today. But we've also got full screens and ad mobs, which is for ads, all sorts of different ways of creating applications. And think of these as just something to get you started with. It's sort of like a template. It's like choosing a template in Word or in PowerPoint and having something to start with. You can still override that and change it. There's just options there just to try and reduce a bit of time when you're creating your Android app. But we're going to choose blank activity in this case. Click on Next. And finally, just before we actually get it to generate the code for us, it's coming up and asking us some questions. And the first one is going to be the activity name. So what do we actually want to call this? What is this, effectively, what is this going to be called? And we're going to use the default main activity. Now, we'll talk about activities and what that means and so forth in later videos. This is meant to be just an introductory video giving you the basics. So for now, just leave it the main activity. And the layout name and menu resource names, you'll see those in the code shortly, but they just refer to a component of the application. So you can override these and change them to whatever you like. But I'm going to suggest you leave the defaults for now. Title we can change. I'm going to type in Hello World because that's the name of our application. So we'll update that. And once we've done that, click on Finish. And what's happening now is Android Studio has taken the information, the choices we've selected, and it's creating a base Android project. And that project's going to be used from this point forward that we can actually start working on, and we start going through the various options that come up with it. So the very first time you do actually go into this, it can take a while to start. So bear in mind that it's downloading in some cases the code, checking the latest versions and so forth. So it can take a little bit of time. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into full screen mode so we can see things a bit better. Actually, what I'll do, I'll go out of there briefly because it's still setting itself up. So I'm going to exit there. And we can see down the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, it's actually working away. There's a little progress bar there. So as I said, it can take a while initially, and that's because it's actually configuring and setting things up. So what I'm going to do is pause the video now and come back when it's just about finished, and then we can continue where we left off. Okay, you can see it's just about finished now, and as soon as it's finished, I'm just going to put it into full screen mode again so we can see it a bit clearer. Well, that's finished now, and you notice we've now got some things that have come up on the screen, and it's got a representation of an Android device running the application we've just had created for us. So I'm going to go into full screen mode again and see it a bit easier. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just make a bit more space here. I'm going to add the project to the left-hand side there so we can see that. Now, there's lots of things to talk about on the screen, and again, looking at it, you might be thinking, wow, where do I start with all of this? But the thing to keep in mind with a lot of this is there's a lot of information on the screen, but you don't need to understand a lot of it. As we go through the course, for example, you'll understand what layouts are and widgets and so forth and text fields. We'll do that in a later course, but just keep that into the back of your mind that right now, this Android Studio application is very powerful, and it does enable you to create very complex applications. But you don't need to know a lot of those advanced things yet, and in fact we're not going to be using some of those until later in the course. But going through some of the fundamental things, I'm going to show you just how to make a few little changes before the next video where we actually start running this particular application. First thing I'd like to draw your attention to though is the over here there's 23, the picture of the Android and the number 23. And what that's telling us is that it's API 23. We're running Android 6.0. And you may not have this, but I've actually also got API 22 on my computer. So I could actually switch between those two versions if I wanted to. But generally I recommend that you only need to actually specify API 23 and only have that version on your computer. So I'm going to leave that selected. Now the other thing is you may recall when we actually set up that wizard that it actually asked for the names, and we saw the layout name, which was activity_main, and also there was a menu_main. Now what these relate to is the actual layout, and the layout is actually what you can see on the screen. So think of the layout can be interchangeably known as the screen. So this is the what's called the XML file, and we'll be talking about XML in a later video. But essentially this is the way that Android enables you to change and update the screen. So for example, what we could do is have a look on here. We can click into there, and you notice when I've clicked into there, it's actually highlighted that on the screen, and we could actually, if we wanted to, we could move that up and down and do whatever we wanted to do and put it into another location. But I'm just going to leave it where it is for now anyway. But the other thing we can do is if we just go in there, make sure that's selected, then if I scroll down here in the right-hand corner, you'll notice text, and it's got @string hello world, and we can actually change that. So there's two ways of doing that. And what Android does, it makes it easy for us. We can literally just overwrite that if we wanted to. So I can take that out. I was here, and you can notice that the field has been instantly updated, and we can actually go through in there and actually change the size, and we could do all sorts of other things if we wanted to. What I'll do is I'll just come back here and actually just finish typing it. I was here. And notice as I was typing, it actually increases the size of the field automatically for us, which is pretty cool. Now there's other ways of accessing it, and some of these are got to do with getting into files. It's probably outside of the scope of this first video, strings.xml and so forth. So I've shown you a way to actually update the screen, which you probably wouldn't do in a real application, but it's enough to get us going for now. The point is that we can very easily update this, which is pretty cool. So the other thing I want to show you now is just before we run out of time for this video and before we actually try running this, is first we'll come over here where it's got Android. We click on project, and that's what I recommend, that when you're running your Android or designing your Android apps, project mode is the best way to go. So you click on project. I'm going to expand this out, and these are all the files that are associated with this application. So we can go up, I'm just clicking on the arrows to open it out, going right down, and eventually we get into the layout files. So this layout file there, that is actually this file here. It's a representation of that. And there's the code has been automatically created. Remember, the main activity was another option that was actually specified. That's the file that was created automatically. And that's the code, which probably makes no sense at all to you now, but that'll be making a lot more sense as we proceed through in later videos. So the point of all this is that Wizard at the start created a lot of this code for us automatically, so that we don't have to go through and manually create a lot of this. And that's part of the beauty of Android Studio, is that it does a lot of this work for us, saving us a lot of time when we're creating our applications. So the last thing I want to show you now in this video, because it is starting to get a bit long, is I want to show you some of the project options. So to access the options, you click on this little app here, where it says app, right click that, and click on open module settings. And this actually gives us a list of other properties that we can perhaps change if we wanted to. So we've got the compile SDK version, and we could change that to another version, but you should as a general rule, make sure you always target and use that version. I'll just open that out a little bit so we can see it a bit better. Compile SDK, you probably shouldn't need to ever change that. That should be the latest version that you're running. But this is here. In later videos, we'll go through and make a lot more. It'll make a lot more sense as we go through and discuss what some of these things are, the signing and build types and so forth. So again, I know it's a little bit overwhelming, but the basic point I want to point out is that a lot of the work has been created, or the actual application has by and large been created automatically for you with very little work. And as we go through the course, a lot of these things will be making a lot more sense. So I'm going to cancel out of there. And I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video, we're going to make a start on running this application. So we're actually going to run it in an emulator, and that's the emulator that we set up in a previous video. And then in the video after that one, I'm going to show you how it runs just on an actual Android device. So I'll see you in that next video.